She hid and nursed the Korean Mafia boss in secret. Nobody knew. Only her. She kept him alive in that back room, night after night, with her own hands. No records, no names, no one to call if something went wrong. Just her, and him, and a secret that could end both of them. She was a nurse. That was the only reason she stayed. She had been trained to save a life, not to ask whether that life deserved saving. So she worked. She kept quiet. She told herself it would end the moment he was strong enough to walk out that door. But the bullets that put him there in the first place, they did not stop coming. And when she finally traced them back, all the way back, to where they started, what she found shattered everything she thought she knew about her own life. She never saw it coming. Nobody did. If this is your first time here, welcome. On this channel we tell stories that stay with you long after they end. If you've been here before, you already know what's coming. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's get into it. This one is going to hurt. She told herself she was ready to come back to Korea. She was wrong about that, but she didn't know it yet. Dina had spent 4 years building a life in Lagos, nursing school, then the hospital wards, then early mornings and double shifts, and the particular pride of someone who has made herself useful through hard work alone. She was good at her job. She was steady. Her hands didn't shake. In Lagos, nobody knew her last name, and that was the most important thing about Lagos. Nobody knew she was a Kwan. Then the offer came. A private clinic in Busan, triple her salary, a small apartment near the harbor, 6-month contract, clean paperwork, discreet work environment. The kind of language that meant, we don't ask questions, and neither do you. She accepted. She told herself it was the money. Maybe it was. Maybe she also thought she was strong enough now to be near her old life without being pulled back into it. She landed in Busan on a Tuesday in October. The air smelled like salt and diesel, and something frying in the restaurant below the taxi stand. The city was loud and bright, and completely indifferent to her. She liked that. She needed that. The clinic had no sign on the door. 3rd floor, up a staircase that smelled like the sea had gotten into the walls. Dr. Seo met her on the first day with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the careful manner of a man who had learned to reveal very little. He showed her the supply room. He showed her the patient records system. Minimal, coded, nothing that would survive a direct question. He said the clients were executives, people in sensitive industries, people who required discretion above everything else. She understood what he meant. She had grown up around men who required discretion above everything else. She took the job. She started work the next morning. For 3 weeks, everything was manageable. She treated a stab wound and called it a kitchen accident in her notes. She managed a withdrawal case and documented it as a severe respiratory episode. She was professional. She was quiet. She kept her head down and her hands busy, and told herself this was temporary. Just money. Just a bridge to somewhere better. She didn't know the offer had not found her by accident. She didn't know that Dr. Seo had been given her name 6 weeks before he sent the contract. She didn't know he had been told she was the right candidate, that she was medically excellent, emotionally contained, and most importantly, that certain people in Seoul wanted her in that building. She didn't know that the clinic job, the triple salary, the small apartment near the harbor, all of it had been arranged. She was not recruited. She was placed. But that truth was still hiding, and for 3 weeks, everything seemed manageable. Then came the Thursday. 3:47 in the morning, the supply room, 2nd cup of coffee going cold on the counter. Dr. Seo pushed through the double doors with sweat soaking through his collar. His hands were at his sides, but they weren't still. She noticed that immediately. His hands were never still when something was wrong. Emergency intake, he said. VIP, I need your best hands right now. She put down the coffee cup. How bad? 2 gunshot wounds. Entry and exit, right shoulder. 1 bullet lodged near the floating rib. He's lost a lot of blood. He can't go to a hospital. She looked at him for 1 full second. Can't, she said, or won't. Dr. Seo didn't answer, and that was the answer. She pulled on her gloves and followed him down the hall. They wheeled him in on a black-sheeted gurney, and she thought, theatrical. Then she saw the blood soaking through 3 layers of gauze, and she stopped thinking anything except what needed to happen next. He was unconscious. 2 men in dark jackets stood at the door the moment he came through it. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They just stood there like they'd been placed, which they had. She ignored them and went to work. His blood pressure was crashing. Heart rate climbing in the wrong direction. She put in 2 large bore lines, wide open, Ringer's lactate running fast. She got the portable ultrasound on him and confirmed what she already suspected. The lodged bullet was close to the rib membrane, sitting at an angle that would need to come out carefully, or not at all. She started talking herself through it in a low murmur, not for anyone else's benefit, just to keep her own rhythm steady. 4 hours later, his pressure was back. His color was returning. The crisis had moved back from the edge. She wrote her notes, washed his blood from her hands at the sink, stood at the window for a moment, and watched the harbor turn from black to gray, to the pale gold of a Busan morning. She did not ask his name. She told herself it didn't matter. She was wrong about that too. He woke up on the second day. She was changing his IV bag when she felt it, the shift in the room, that particular held breath quality of someone pretending to be asleep. She had learned to recognize it in the pediatric wards in Lagos. Children faked unconsciousness to hear what the adults were saying about them. Grown men, she was learning, did the same thing. She finished the bag without turning around. "Your hands are very steady," he said. Low voice, controlled. A Busan accent with Seoul polish on top of it, someone who had spent time in the capital and brought some of it back south. She answered without turning. "They have to be. Most people are nervous around me. Most people aren't your nurse." She turned around then, and found him watching her the way a man watches something he hasn't finished deciding about. Not hostile, not warm, just calculating, precise, completely alert despite 2 days of sedation and serious blood loss. His eyes were dark. His jaw was tight even at rest, like tension lived there permanently. "How's your pain?" she asked. "Manageable." He tried to sit up. His face went the color of old concrete in 3 seconds flat. "Fractured rib," she said. "And a bullet I haven't removed yet. Lie down." He lay down. She had the impression this was not something he did often. "What is your name?" he asked. "Dina. That's not Korean." "No." She checked his drainage tube. The output was good. "Are you experiencing any numbness in your fingers?" "No." A pause. "Where are you from?" "Lagos. By way of Seoul." She made a note in his chart. "Any difficulty breathing when you inhale fully?" "No." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You studied in Lagos?" "Trained there. 4 years. And then you came back to Korea." "And then I came back." She looked at him. "What's your last name?" He paused. Just a fraction of a second. The kind of pause she had learned to notice growing up, the calculation of how much truth to offer. "Min Jae," he said. "First name only." She gave him her mother's surname, not her father's. Neither of them offered a complete truth. Neither of them pushed. They were, from the very first exchange, 2 people talking around the edges of themselves. She would think about that later, how they'd both started in the same place. Over the next 4 days, she checked him at 6, noon, 6, and midnight. He received 2 visitors. The first was a thin young man who arrived on day 3. He whispered urgently, standing close to the bed with his back to the door, and his eyes moving to the window every few seconds. He left looking frightened. She didn't know his name. She didn't ask. The second visitor came on day 4. A woman in a silk coat the color of dark plum, expensive shoes, her hair pinned back in the way of someone who is always composed in public. She walked into the room without knocking, sat in the chair beside Min Jae's bed, and cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. She cried the way people cry when they have been holding something very heavy for a long time, and finally put it down, just for a moment, in a room where they feel safe enough. She stayed for 20 minutes. Then she stood up, smoothed her coat, and left without speaking. Dina was in the doorway when the woman passed her. Their eyes met for just a second. The woman stopped. She looked at Dina, really looked, the way people do when they're searching a face for something specific. Her expression was controlled. But underneath the control was something that looked like recognition, and underneath the recognition was something that looked like a decision being made. Then she nodded, once, and walked out. Dina stood there for a moment. She told herself it was nothing. A stranger's grief. People in difficult situations behaved in unpredictable ways. She had learned that in the wards. She let it go. That was a mistake. On the fifth night, she found him awake at 2 a.m. She came in for the midnight check. The room was dark except for the blue light of the monitors. He was lying completely still with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling with the kind of exhaustion that belongs to people who have forgotten what rest feels like. On the windowsill, the harbor lights were moving, a cargo ship tracking slowly south, its reflection long and broken on the black water below. She went to the convenience store 2 blocks away and came back with 2 cups of warm barley tea. She set one on his side table. She sat in the chair beside his bed. He looked at the cup, then at her. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know." Outside, the ship moved through the harbor. The city made its low night sounds. Distant traffic, a door somewhere, the faint salt breath of the sea coming through the cracked window. "My brother loved the sea," he said. He said it simply, no lead-up, like a thought that had been sitting close to the surface and finally came out. He used to say Busan smelled like salt and possibility. He was still looking at the ceiling. He drowned at 19, Haeundae Beach. The official report said riptide. She wrapped both hands around her tea. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." He said it the way people say things that are not a long time ago at all. "Official report," she said carefully, "meaning you weren't sure you believed it." He turned his head and looked at her. For a moment, the calculating distance was gone from his face. What was under it was quieter and older. "No," he said, "I wasn't sure." She didn't ask more. Instead, she told him about Lagos. The hospital where the power cut out twice a week. The nurses who memorized procedures because there might not be light to see by. Her mentor, Dr. Adeyemi, tiny, fierce, demolisher of arrogant surgeons, who used to say that sympathy was a feeling, but compassion was a decision. He listened. Completely. Without checking the door or the monitors or anything else. Just listened. At 4 a.m. she looked over, and he was asleep. The tension had gone out of his jaw. His face looked younger. She turned off the light and stood in the doorway longer than she needed to. "Don't," she told herself. "Whatever this is, don't." She went back to her station. She didn't stop thinking about what he'd said, about the official report, about the word he'd chosen. Official. On day 8, she was doing supply inventory at the far end of the corridor, the part of the clinic that used to be a storage room and still had no proper lighting, just a bare bulb on a pull cord. The door to Min-jae's room was partially open. She could hear voices. She wasn't trying to listen, but the corridor was quiet, and the voices carried. The thin young man, the one from day 3, was back. He was speaking in a low, fast Korean that she had to concentrate to follow. She heard enough. He had arrangements in place. A boat out of the southern port, 3 nights from now. A contact in Jeju. From Jeju, a flight, a private charter, clean documents, a new name, everything ready. He could be somewhere completely untraceable within 72 hours. A long silence from Min-jae. Then, "Cancel it." "Boss. Cancel the arrangements. I'm not leaving." Another silence. The thin man's voice came back lower, more urgent. He said something about the second attempt, about how the next one would come before Min-jae was strong enough to respond. "I know," Min-jae said. "Cancel it anyway." Dina stood very still in the dim corridor, a box of IV supplies in her hands. She had told herself, every day since she'd read that newspaper, that she was staying because of professional obligation. Because a nurse doesn't abandon a patient mid-treatment. Because she had started this and she would finish it and then she would walk away and never look back. But Min-jae had a way out. A real one. 3 nights away. And he wasn't taking it. She thought about that for the rest of the day. She thought about it while she prepped the surgical tray. She thought about it while she removed the bullet from near his rib. 2 hours of careful, concentrated work. She thought about it while she wrote her notes and washed her hands and stood at the window watching the harbor. He wasn't staying to recover. He was staying for something else entirely. She almost asked him. She came close, 3 separate times over the next 2 days. But she didn't ask. Because she wasn't sure she was ready for the answer. On the 7th morning, one of the guards left a newspaper in the waiting area. Dina picked it up out of habit. She flipped through it on her break, coffee in hand, expecting nothing. She stopped on page 3. The photograph was blurry. Surveillance distance. taken from above. A face in profile. A jaw she recognized. Eyes she recognized. The headline was in bold. Assassination attempt on Kim Min-jae, Busan's phantom boss. Fails. Whereabouts unknown. She read the article. She read it again. She read the words controlled. Criminal investigations. Feared. Dangerous. Busan's southern port operations. She folded the newspaper exactly as she'd found it. Placed it at the exact same angle on the table. Walked to the bathroom. Turned on the cold tap. Put both wrists under the water. Her hands were shaking. Kim Min-jae. Not just Min-jae who talked about his brother at 2 a.m. over barley tea. Kim Min-jae. One of the most dangerous men in the south of the country. She turned off the tap, dried her hands, looked at herself in the mirror. Then she walked back to his room, checked his morning vitals, updated his chart, and said nothing. She needed time to think. That was what she told herself. But underneath that, she already knew. She had already decided. She just hadn't said it out loud yet. He knew she'd found out. She didn't know how. She hadn't given anything away, or thought she hadn't. But 2 days later, while she was redressing his shoulder wound, he said quietly, "You know who I am." It wasn't a question. She kept working, pressed a fresh gauze square over the wound, smoothed the tape. "Does it change anything?" he asked. She stepped back and looked at him directly. "It changes my legal exposure significantly." Something moved through his eyes, not quite a smile, closer to recognition, like she'd said something that landed somewhere he hadn't expected. "The bullet near your rib needs to come out tonight," she said. "Your pressure has been stable for 48 hours. I don't want to wait any longer. You're changing the subject. I'm doing my job." She held his gaze. "In here, you're my patient. That's all." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I need you to not tell the police I'm here." He said it simply. Not a threat, not a demand. A request, placed on the table between them, with the full understanding that she could say no. She thought about Dr. Adeyemi. "Compassion is a decision." "I know," she said, and turned to prepare the surgical tray. She removed the bullet that night. 2 hours of careful, slow work. The fragment had shifted, 2 small pieces closer to the membrane than the original scan had shown. She talked herself through every step in a low, steady murmur. Dr. Seo assisted, and later told her he'd found it calming. When it was done, she placed the fragment in the steel dish and stood still. She listened to the harbor. She thought about her father. His name was Kwon Sung-hyun, and if you passed him on the street, you'd think, retired academic, soft-spoken, kind eyes. He cooked on Sunday mornings. He remembered everything she liked. He called every week without fail for 8 years, even after she'd made it clear she wanted distance. In private, he was a good father. What he was professionally, that was something else. Dina had understood this from childhood, the way children understand things they are never told directly, through silences in certain conversations, through the way certain men looked at her father when they thought no one was watching them look. She had left Seoul at 22 because of a conversation she had heard through a study door, one she had carried sealed inside herself ever since, like something that might detonate if moved carelessly. Being back in Korea felt like walking through a crowd with something sharp in her pocket. She went home, slept 3 hours, came back. Min-jae was sleeping peacefully. She checked his vitals, updated the chart, stood at the window and watched the harbor for a minute before moving on. Then day 11 arrived, and everything cracked open. She was in the supply room doing inventory when she heard the shots. 2 of them. Flat, fast, suppressed. Not silent, just muffled. The sound of something professional. Then voices in the corridor. Then running. She stood still for 2 seconds. Then she ran toward it. The room. Min-jae on the floor between the bed and the wall. Shot through the right shoulder. The same wound she had spent 10 days repairing. Blood coming fast. 1 guard down near the door, completely still. The 2nd guard had been in the corridor. She could hear the sounds of a struggle, something heavy hitting the wall, going quiet. She crossed the room and got her hands on the wound before she said a word. "Stay with me," first in Korean, then in English, then back to Korean, her brain splitting under the pressure. "Stay with me, don't you dare, stay with me." His jaw was locked. His face had gone the gray color of serious blood loss, that specific waxy shade she had seen before, and hated with the hatred of someone who works hard every day to prevent it. The phone. His voice was tight, controlled, still. Don't. His hand found her wrist. Even now, his grip was strong. Under the mattress. There's a phone. Don't let them have it. He held her eyes. There's a recording on it. Whatever happens, don't let them have the phone. She said nothing. She held the wound. She called for Dr. Seo. They worked for 3 hours. He made it. By the smallest margin she had ever watched someone come back from. But he made it. When his vitals finally steadied and his color started returning to something living, she sat down on the supply room floor and put her head on her knees. 3 minutes. She gave herself exactly 3 minutes. Then she stood up, washed her face, changed her gloves. She went and retrieved the phone from under the mattress. It was a burner, cracked screen, one app beside the factory defaults, a voice recorder, one saved file, 22 seconds of audio. She pressed play. The voice spoke in Korean. Seoul Korean, the specific accent of the old Mapo district. A voice that was calm and gave orders the way certain men give orders. Without volume, without effort, with the absolute certainty of someone who has never once needed to raise it. Move to stage 2. The nurse is a complication. Remove her after he's dead. Make it clean. The room went silent. She played it again. Her father's voice. She sat with it for a long time. The clock on the wall moved. The harbor made its sounds outside. A monitor beeped steadily somewhere down the hall, measuring time in the same rhythm it always had, indifferent to the fact that her entire understanding of her own life had just rearranged itself. The nurse is a complication. He had known she was there. He had known and given the order anyway. She was still sitting there 20 minutes later when she heard footsteps in the corridor. Slow, deliberate, not a guard's walk, different. The woman in the silk coat appeared in the doorway. She wasn't crying this time. She was completely still. She looked at Dina for a moment, then she looked at the phone on the table. She had the eyes of someone who already knew what was on it. You heard it, the woman said, quietly, in Korean. Dina didn't answer. I'm Han Ji-yeon, the woman said. Soo-han was my brother. Min-jae is my brother too. She stepped into the room and sat down in the chair across from Dina without being invited. I've known your father's name for 4 years. I knew who you were the moment I saw you in that doorway on day 4. The fluorescent light above them buzzed once. Neither of them moved. You said nothing, Dina said. No. Why? Ji-yeon looked at her hands for a moment. They were folded in her lap, precise and controlled. Because I needed to know whose side you were on. Not what you said you were. What you did. She paused. You stayed. After you found out who he was. You stayed. You turned down a very easy exit. She looked up. That told me enough. Dina stared at her. You were watching me. I was protecting my brother. I've been doing it since he was 7 years old. I'm not going to stop now because a nurse feels uncomfortable about it. Dina thought about 4 days ago. The corridor, the supply room, the overheard conversation about the boat and the clean documents. Did you know he refused to leave? Ji-yeon's expression shifted, just slightly. Yes. Do you know why? Ji-yeon looked at her for a long moment. I think you already know why, she said. I think that's what's making you uncomfortable. Neither of them said anything for a full 10 seconds. Then Ji-yeon stood. She smoothed her coat. That same precise, controlled gesture. She picked up a small envelope from her inside pocket and placed it on the table beside the phone. Everything you need is in there. Where to go? Who to call? When to move? She walked to the door. The recording needs to reach the right person. He can't do it himself. Not right now. But you can. She stopped in the doorway. He trusted you with the phone, she said. I'm trusting you with the rest. Then she was gone. Dina sat alone in the room with the phone and the envelope and the buzzing light overhead. She thought, I came here to be invisible. She opened the envelope. She drove to Seoul. 5 hours. Rain the whole way. The flat, settled Korean autumn rain that doesn't storm. It just stays. She drank gas station coffee and listened to nothing, and arrived at her father's house at noon. The gate opened when the camera recognized her face. She was still the daughter. She would always be the daughter. He was in his study, tea in hand, reading glasses on the desk. He looked like someone's grandfather. He looked like the man who had taught her to ride a bicycle and checked her homework and never once missed a Sunday call. He set down the tea when she walked in. He looked at her face. She didn't sit down. "You tried to have him killed twice," she said, "and you ordered them to kill me." He was quiet. That was the first thing she noticed. He didn't deny it. He just folded his hands on the desk and looked at her with the expression she had known her whole life. The one she had always read as, "I am about to say something that will pain me." The one she now understood meant something different entirely. "Min Jae has been moving against my operations for 2 years, he said. His voice was even. It was always even. The southern ports, channels I spent 30 years building. He's not competition. He's dismantling. And me?" She kept her voice steady. "You gave the order knowing I was in that building. I didn't know when the order was placed. By the time I found out you were there. Were you going to cancel it?" He didn't answer immediately. That pause lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds that said everything. "I need you to leave Korea," he said. "Tonight. Tokyo. I have an apartment there. You'll be safe. You'll have money. In 6 months." "What happened to Min Jae's brother?" she said. He went still. Han Soo-han. 19 years old. Haeundae Beach. Official ruling. Riptide. She watched her father's face. Was it an accident? The study was very quiet. Her father looked at his hands. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She had spent her whole life watching this man. She knew every signal, every shift, every version of his silence. The silence that meant yes, but I won't say so. She had seen it exactly twice before, as a child, asking questions she had then wished she could take back. She left the study. She left the house. She sat in her car outside the gate for 3 minutes, rain drumming on the roof. Then she started the engine and drove back to Busan. Min Jae woke on the second day after surgery. She was sitting in the chair beside his bed, still in her outdoor clothes. She hadn't gone home. He opened his eyes and found her there. He didn't look surprised. "You went somewhere," he said. "Seoul." He waited. She told him everything. The recording. The voice she recognized. Her father's name. The drive in the rain. The study. The question about his brother. The silence that answered it. And then, Jiyeon. What she had said. What she had known. What she had placed on the table in that envelope. He was very still through all of it. When she finished, he looked at the window for a long time. "She wasn't supposed to get involved," he said. "She's been involved since Soo-han died. She told me that herself." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had shifted. Not broken, but opened. Like a window that had been painted shut for years finally giving way. She's the one who put 2 years of documentation together. She's the one who contacted the journalist. I gave her the framework. She built the case. He paused. I told her to stay out of sight, to stay away from the clinic. She came anyway. She always does. He said it like grief and pride were the same thing, like loving a person who won't stay safe is its own kind of wound you learn to carry. "You had a way out," Dina said. "The boat. Day 8. Your man had everything arranged." He looked at her. He didn't ask how she knew. "I know," he said. "You stayed." "Yes." She held his gaze. "For the recording." He didn't answer immediately. And in that pause, in the specific quality of that silence, she understood that the recording was only part of the answer. She didn't push. She wasn't ready to push. "The journalist," she said instead. "Jiyeon gave me a name. Is it the right person?" "Yes." She nodded. She thought about everything that was coming. The arrests, the trials, the long, grinding machinery of accountability. She thought about men in expensive suits being asked on camera to explain decisions they had made in quiet rooms a long time ago. She thought about a 19-year-old with sketchbooks full of buildings. "When the investigation opens," she said, "it comes for you too." "Yes." "You're not going to run?" He looked at the harbor, the sea that took his brother. The city he had spent 15 years operating inside of, building toward a moment that had always, underneath everything, been about a boy who'd wanted to be an architect. "No," he said. "I'm not going to run." 3 days later, Min Jae's associate came to the clinic. He placed a sealed folder on her desk, said the boss thought she should see it, and left. She opened it. Financial records, wire transfers, shell corporations, names she didn't recognize. Offshore accounts in jurisdictions, designed to make money untraceable. And a photograph. 3 men at the entrance of a restaurant. The man on the right, she recognized from the news. Chief Prosecutor Lim, senior law enforcement. Clean reputation. On television twice a month speaking about justice. Standing with her father. Below the photograph, in Min Jae's handwriting, "Your father doesn't run the Kwan cartel." For 20 years, the Kwan cartel has been the enforcement arm of a corruption network operating inside the government. 3 senior officials, 2 prosecutors, 1 deputy commissioner. They used your father's network to remove people who knew too much and protect people who knew everything. Suhan was one of the people who knew too much. Your father didn't give the order because of power. He gave it because he was told to. She sat down. She read it again. Her father was not the apex of the world she had spent her life trying to escape. He was a weapon, a very sophisticated, very obedient weapon, held by men who sat in government offices with perfect records and gave interviews about the rule of law. She turned to the last page. A copy of the recording has been sent to an investigative journalist. Additional documentation has been provided. Once the story is published, the investigation will open. It will go all the way up. Your father will be arrested. The men above him will fall. This is already in motion. You couldn't have stopped it, but you could have been killed before it happened. I needed you to be safe first. She pressed both hands flat on the table. He had known who she was from the beginning. From day 3, he'd said later, when she asked him directly. The name on her passport, her mother's surname, her father's business name. He had calculated the risk, and kept her close, and not told her. Because telling her earlier would have made her a target with knowledge she couldn't yet protect herself with. She picked up the folder, and went to his room. You knew who I was, she said. From day 3. He didn't look away. I didn't tell you because I needed you to have distance from it. If you didn't know what you were holding, you were harder to target. He paused. Everything I told you was true. The phone. The recording. What I said about Suhan. All of it was true. You used me. I protected you. He said it simply. Not as a defense. As a fact. There's a difference. I know it doesn't feel like one right now. She looked at him for a long moment. And Dr. Seo? She said. Min Jae was quiet. He placed me here, she said. The job offer wasn't random. Someone sent him my name. Someone wanted me in this building. She watched his face carefully. Was it you? No, he said. And she believed him. The answer came too quickly and too clean. Then who? He looked at the window. Your father, he said. The air in the room changed. He knew I would come to this clinic if I was badly hurt, Min Jae said. He'd been tracking the clinic for months. He put you there to be his eyes. If I ever showed up, you were supposed to report back. He paused. He didn't tell you that. He just made sure you'd be there. She stood very still. Her father had not just known she was in that building. He had put her there. The job offer, the triple salary, the small apartment near the harbor, all of it engineered. She had walked into a trap set by her own father, a trap that was never meant for her, that she was only ever meant to be a piece of. She sat down on the edge of the chair. She thought about the gate opening when the camera saw her face. She would always be the daughter. She had thought that with a kind of grief, in the rain outside his house. Now she understood it differently. She had always been useful to him, even when she thought she'd escaped. She left the clinic that night and drove until she ran out of road, and the harbor opened up in front of her. She parked and sat with the windows down, and the smell of salt water coming in cold and sharp. She thought about the 19-year-old who had said this city smelled like possibility. She stayed there for an hour. Then she drove back and went to work. The story broke on a Monday morning. Dina read it on her phone in the break room of a cardiac surgery unit in Incheon, where she had taken a position 6 weeks after leaving Busan. The article was 6 pages long and completely devastating. The kind of journalism built on 2 years of documentation, cross-referenced, legally bulletproof, impossible to ignore. The recording was there. The photograph was there. The names of every official in the network were there. By noon it was everywhere. By evening, her father's lawyer had issued a statement. By the following Tuesday, the statement was irrelevant. She watched her father's arrest on her phone. She watched him walk out of the house she had grown up in, flanked by officers, cameras everywhere. He was composed. Of course he was. He had always been composed. Right to the end, he moved like a man who believed composure was its own kind of power. She visited him once. 3 weeks later. The visiting room smelled like disinfectant. Plastic chairs, beige walls, the particular flatness of institutional spaces that have held too many difficult conversations. He came in looking smaller. Men who build their size from power always shrink when the power goes. Same face. Same hands. But the specific quality of presence that had once filled every room he entered, gone. She sat across from him. She had rehearsed this for weeks. Every question she needed to ask. But sitting there, looking at him, she understood something she hadn't expected. She wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned through on the drive to the harbor. What was left was something cooler and clearer. "You placed me in that clinic," she said. She didn't make it a question. He looked at the table. "Yes." "You sent me there to watch for him, in case he ever showed up." "Yes." "And when he did, and I was already inside, you still gave the order." He was quiet for a long moment. "I made a call," he said. She waited. "The night of the second shooting," he said, "when I confirmed you were in the building, I made a call to delay the order, to pull you out first." His voice didn't waver, but something underneath it did. The call didn't reach in time. She looked at him. He was telling her he had tried. One call, one night, 1 minute too late. He was telling her that when it finally came down to the choice, between her and the mission, he had chosen her. It was the smallest possible redemption, barely visible, arrived a second too late to matter. And he was still her father. That was the thing she had never been able to explain to anyone, that he was still the man who cooked soup on Sundays and checked her homework and never missed a call. That monsters are rarely monstrous to their daughters. That love and damage can live in the same person, in the same hands, and you carry both of them your whole life. "Did you ever think about stopping?" she asked. He looked at the table. "Many times. But you didn't." "No. Why not?" He was quiet. "By the time I understood what I was fully inside of, I was already too deep, and the people above me had made clear what leaving would cost." A long pause. "That is not an excuse." "No," she said. "It's not." She sat with that for a moment. "I forgive you," she said. He looked up. "Not for you. For me." She stood. "Because carrying it is too heavy, and I have other things I need to be able to carry." She walked out of the room. She didn't look back. Outside, the Seoul air was cold and clean. She stood on the pavement with her face tilted slightly up and breathed. Then she went to the train station and went back to Incheon. She got the package on a Tuesday in spring. No return address. Her name on the front in handwriting she recognized. Careful, angular, the handwriting of a man who chose every letter deliberately. Inside, a CD case. Old-fashioned, hand-lettered label. An old Korean ballad she didn't recognize, the kind that sounded like late nights and open water. And a note. 6 sentences this time. "The harbor still smells the same. The investigation is moving. Ji-yeon says hello. She also says you already know the answer to the question you've been sitting with. I think she's right. Get some sleep. MJ." She held the case for a long time. She thought about a woman in a silk coat who had watched her for 4 days before deciding to trust her. She thought about a man who had turned 15 years of grief into something that finally, after everything it cost, pointed toward justice. She thought about a call made one night that arrived a second too late, and what it meant that he had made it. She thought about the question she had been sitting with, the one she hadn't said out loud, the one that lived in the pause, in his silence when she had asked why he stayed. She set the case on her desk. She put on her coat. She took the elevator to the lobby. She walked outside into the Incheon afternoon. The air smelled like the sea. She stood there in the cold for a full minute, face tilted up slightly. She thought about salt and possibility. She thought about a 19-year-old boy who believed in both. Then she went back inside. She had a patient to see. If this story moved you, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this one, stories about impossible choices, and the people who make them. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. We have more coming. We always do. See you in the next one.